This episode is proudly brought to you by the TPG Telecom Foundation, dedicated to creating opportunities to improve the health, well-being and education of Australian communities in need. Hi, I'm Megan Gilmour, Missing School co-founder and CEO, and this is Live and Learn. This is the podcast that unearths insights at the intersection of health and education, building a powerful alliance to keep kids with complex health conditions connected to school from anywhere. The podcast is recorded on Ngunnawal land, and we acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of this land and the land on which you're listening. Welcome to our weekly webcast, a place to zero in on the interplay between health and education and to amplify the voices of those supporting school students to navigate their educational journeys despite complex health challenges. And today we have with us Christine Brooks. Christine Brooks is Vice Chair of NOFASD Australia, the national peak body for families affected by fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. A caregiver to a young adult with FASD and an experienced teacher, Christine has worked in remote Northern Territory communities, taught early learners and supported teens with diverse challenges. Her lived experience drives her passion to equip educators and foster awareness, prevention, diagnosis and support for FASD. Welcome, Christine. We're so excited to have you on Live and Learn.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you so much for having me, especially on FASD Awareness Day. So it's International FASD Awareness Day today, so very appropriate. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for calling that out, because today we're here to talk about supporting school connections for students with complex medical or mental health conditions. So let's get started by heading into the first question. Christine, tell us how fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, impacts kids and why it's something every Australian needs to know and care about.
Well, FASD is far more prevalent than people realise, so it's so important that people become educated about it. It's a lifelong disability, a whole body disability. So it only can be caused by prenatal exposure to alcohol. You can't catch FASD and you don't grow out of FASD. But we can do a lot to support those living with FASD and really adjust their lives to make it, quite thrive. They can thrive. Now, it affects learning, memory, behaviour, attention, emotional regulation, executive functioning skills and physical health. It's different in each person. Each child presents differently with their own set of challenges, and teachers, families, health, the sector, everybody needs to understand that FASD is everywhere in our community. So it's really important Australians know about it.
Thank you for that enlightening introduction. And I know we're going to get into some detail along the way. So I'm looking forward to understanding more about this, as are people who'll listen. So many people probably assume things about FASD. What's the million-dollar question, Christine, that you get from parents or loved ones when their child experiences FASD?
Well, probably the average age for diagnosis is around 6 or 7, although it can be diagnosed in infancy, and also we have adults being regularly diagnosed. So that parents perhaps living with a child for 6 or 7 years will already understand much of the behaviour and the concerns and the difficulties that a child is going to face. So sort of aware of what FASD is like. I guess their questions are around how much they can help them, what they can do to help them become independent in their living, their work. It's also often around the stigma involved, and we support a lot of parents because that's something difficult for them to face. It's interesting because each child presents differently. We've got a set of different concerns from each family, but it really requires a whole family to care for a child living with FASD. But with, the right environment, understanding and support, they can thrive and have a wonderful life. So there's lots that can be done.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you mentioned that even adults are being diagnosed, and I know we'll get into that, and it just really kind of caught me, I guess. I would have
Yeah,
thought that it's something that's known straight away, but
not at
intuitively,
all.
then it makes
No,
sense that
no.
we might not be aware.
We have people more and more regularly as the education about FASD has come to light, just generally, we have more and more people contact us saying, I think I've been living with FASD all my life. And they
Hmm.
can be in their 40s, 50s, or even 60s,
Yeah,
and they decide
indeed.
to get a diagnosis. So it's a very hidden disability. It really is.
Unsurprising, actually, but yeah, so keen to know more. So, what's the most important thing that you want them to know? And you started to say some of that earlier, which was that these people can thrive. But
Yes.
tell us more about what you
Well,
want.
I'm perhaps focusing on younger children because
Mm,
that's really what we're looking at today. But I really want people to understand that this is a brain-based disorder. This is not about bad behavior.
mhm,
And we always say it's not that they won't, they can't. And I think, particularly for educators, to understand that these children need support, they've got a disability. And I always use the example, if they were blind or if they're in a wheelchair, all sorts of supports and understanding would be put there in place to support the child. And if it's not recognised, then it's always assumed that the child can do better, try harder, not get tired, all of these things. So
mm,
when families, schools, and communities understand this, children will do far better when they feel supported. And of course, the
mm,
families will be able to cope better too. So I
mm.
guess empathy and flexibility will make all the difference. And seeing the child through what we call a FASD lens and trying to see the world the way the child is seeing the world really does help. Yes.
Yeah. And I just want to jump in and ask so many questions. And I know I have questions ahead, so I might just hold off on that because I think we'll cover them. But thank you for identifying that this is a disability and it's a brain issue. So
Mm.
are we saying it's a structural brain issue, that something's happened there at a critical development stage in utero? And
Yes.
it's we're looking at structural changes that took place in the brain or things that didn't go the way
Yes.
they might have.
Look, it's a very complex disorder, and because it is caused through prenatal alcohol exposure, it depends on the time the alcohol was consumed. So, which trimester, how much, what was consumed, the health of the mother, the genetics, the amount drinking.
Mm,
It's extraordinary the number of factors that come into play, and that is why it presents differently in each child. So my girl that
mm.
I look after is the eldest of six, and each of her siblings, then undiagnosed at this stage, she's been diagnosed. Well, they all present differently. I assume they all have FASD. They all present differently because it depends on so many different factors.
Yes, I guess it's a range or a spectrum of
Very much a spectrum. Yes,
presentations. Yeah.
very much a spectrum. Yes.
Okay. We'd
And
love to know if
sorry to
it's,
interrupt,
yeah.
Megan, but I think we should jump back to the fact that we didn't go into the actual name of FASD.
Okay.
And the
Yes.
fact that our organisation is called NOFASD, which does stand for National Organisation of Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. And just when you said the word spectrum, I thought we better bring that up. It is part of the name, so fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Now, people often feel awkward about using the name, and they will just say that they have, a brain-based disability or something like that. They don't need to use the
Mm.
whole terminology, but that's as it is known now in Australia.
Uh-huh. Yes. And we talked about before the call the play on the word no, national organization, but
Yes,
also
national
no.
organisation, yes. But we would like there to be no FASD.
Absolutely. And thanks for clarifying that for us. If you're willing, we'd love to know what brought you into the world of FASD.
Well, in 2012, a little girl came into my life, sort of unexpectedly, but she's now nearly 21, and I knew she'd had a lot of early childhood trauma. So a lot of the challenging behaviour I put down to trauma. and I just assumed it was that. Now, I was teaching and I had been teaching for many years, and really it was lack of knowledge on my behalf because I wasn't aware of FASD. I'd heard of it, but I really didn't know much about it. And well, she was living with us and I was helping teaching her and she was coming to school with me, I started to observe her and realized that some of her behavior didn't really match with all the trauma behavior that I'd expected. So
Mm.
I delved deeper, and when we discovered that she actually, very likely, she seemed to tick a lot of the boxes, would have FASD. And I knew about her prenatal history, so I suspected that it was FASD.
Mm.
It started making sense. So that's when I became very interested in this complex disorder. And it helped me understand her. But there's no greater teacher than the person living with the condition to give you a true understanding. So, in a way, she's my teacher. And as I say, I'm her advocate. And we've worked together over the years. And I've become very informed through watching her and her behaviour and trying to work out the way she processes the world. So,
Mm.
that's how I ended up where I am, really. And I wish all
Wonderful.
teachers knew about FASD, because once I had a better understanding, of course, I could see it all around me.
Mm. That's exactly what I was thinking when we started this conversation, and my mind joined some dots, which I'll share as we go along and once we get into the school component of our conversation. But thanks for telling us what brought you into the world of FASD, and I might add a remarkable relationship, it sounds, as
Yes,
well.
very close. Yes.
Yeah, and uh, I loved it when you shared that she is your teacher, and that's really how we should look at the lived experience, isn't it? To be
Oh,
able to
yes,
be
yes.
really, truly understanding.
Mm.
Yeah. So, knowing all that you know, what's your biggest hope for kids with FASD or experiencing FASD, their families and loved ones, when navigating this disorder?
Well, I suppose I hope that they will be understood and supported without judgment. There's a lot of stigma and judgment around FASD.
Mm.
I desperately wish that schools and service would become more FASD informed. That's why I thank you for giving me this opportunity, because I'm out there hoping that more people find out about it and become aware. I don't want children to be punished for doing things that are out of their control. And these children are constantly being punished for things that they cannot control.
Mm.
So we need to have that awareness really, really within schools. Um, Families often feel isolated, and particularly if there's a lot of behaviour issues involved. These are the children that don't get invited to the birthday parties. So, more support and judgment, more inclusion. I'd love Australia to build a strong sort of culture where prevention, compassion, and inclusion are just part of the way we live. And we've got a long way to go for that, but it would be wonderful so that the people living with FASD feel as they're really accepted in society.
Yes,
Mhm.
different brains, different bodies, different behaviors.
Totally. Yes. I'm sure you know all about that.
A place for all of it, though.
Oh, absolutely.
And yeah, I'm really seeing how this could explain a lot of what we're seeing currently in our environment, and
Yes.
it's not being seen for what it is either. It's probably getting some there's some more misconceptions, which come leads right to the next question. Christine, what are some of the common and perhaps frustrating public misconceptions about FASD, and how have you seen it impact families?
Well, getting back to the behaviour, a lot of these kids are considered naughty or bad, and they,
Mm.
rather than just living with brain differences, they're sort of labelled in a very negative way. A lot of people believe that FASD is rare. And I have to say that I was one of those. I mean, as a teacher, I knew all about
Yeah,
autism. We'd had so much
yeah.
professional development. I'd never had professional development about FASD. So we need to educate people and get it out into the communities that it's not rare, that it's everywhere, and
Mm.
that children won't grow out of it. Also, the thought, and this is still very common, that it's an Indigenous problem or a socioeconomic problem, and it's not. Wherever there is alcohol, there will be FASD. It's right across the country, and it's very prevalent because we're a culture that loves our alcohol, and
Mm. Yeah.
It really is everywhere. So we need to just change some of that thinking.
Yeah. Well, again, I'll put myself into that category as well. But the moment you started talking, I just I got it. I got that exactly what you're saying. We're a country that loves a drink,
Mm,
and we've talked about the fact that it can be a range of presentations depending on, well, severity and um, what the underlying circumstances were in terms of the consumption of alcohol prenatal, and also to to address that misconception that that would just exist in certain cultures or certain parts of the country, certain
mm,
demographics, let's call it. But actually, given what we know about Australia's love of a drink,
yeah. Yes.
yeah, and I can also see how there would be a lot of judgment of women too. Um,
Oh, huge judgment. And you don't have to be alcohol dependent. It can be a social drinker.
mm,
And many women who are unaware, it's not their fault. They are unaware of the outcome of drinking during pregnancy. And so they love to have their wines with their girlfriends. It's they're not
mm,
dependent on alcohol. They just socially drink.
mm,
And very sadly, these children are affected. So
yeah.
one in 13 of all cases where women have been drinking during pregnancy the outcome will be a FASD diagnosis. So,
Yeah, could you just say that again for me?
so one in 13 of all cases where a woman is drinking, pregnancies exposed to alcohol, will result in a FASD diagnosis.
That's huge.
It is. It's massive. Yes. And you
Mm,
wouldn't take that risk. You wouldn't say, well, I'll let my child run across the
mm,
highway. He may not be hit by a truck.
mm.
I'll
Yeah.
have a drink. We may not have SD. But of course, it's often, could be mildly affected and not really, right up to
Mm,
getting a diagnosis. But it's not worth
yeah.
the risk. It
Yeah.
is not for 9 months. It's not worth the risk.
Yeah. And to me, when given everything you're saying and the way that I've joined the dots in such a short time because of your insights, I wonder then why we're not having a bigger conversation about this, why there isn't more public information campaigns and social education campaigns. Because I can also see how this could be misdiagnosed as ADHD or
Yes.
autism spectrum
Yes.
disorder, and yet it's not.
Yep. Well, a couple of the reasons, the alcohol companies are very powerful, very powerful. You may know on all alcohol now they have to have it's mandatory to have the label warning
Uh-huh.
women against drinking. That took nearly 20 years to come about.
Okay.
We have had, you might be aware of the Every Moment Matters campaign, which was advertisements on television. Well, they're very costly. So it
Mm,
really comes back to money. And, it hasn't got the glamour this
yeah.
disorder. We don't get enormous amount of funding. It's one of those things we work hard to get government funding to help support our campaigns. But like everything else, everybody needs money, and I suppose that's the bottom line. We certainly are doing as much as we can, our organisation, and there are other organisations as well, just trying to get the word out there to
Mm,
make people
mm.
aware.
There were 1 in 13 of all cases where there's drinking involved in prenatally. I think that's a shocking stat, and
Mm.
there'd be so many people who aren't aware. So yes, let's dive deeper into this. So, do you know, Christine, how many Australian children and youth might be living with FASD right now? And if so, is that data accurate, tracked? What can you tell
Well,
me about
no, because we haven't done a proper prevalence study throughout Australia. And of course, it's misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. But the estimation, which is pretty good, is between 2 and 5%. We're saying around 3.6%, which is about one in every 28. We like to say there'd be one child in every classroom in Australia with FASD.
that?
So
Yes.
that's a lot. That's high.
Yeah.
It's higher than a lot of people realise. And
Mm,
I think if you think of that as one child in every classroom, it just makes you realise how common it is.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Um, it's yeah, it's a great, I shouldn't say a great way to look at it, but it makes it really simplifies it for
Yes,
us
it does simplify it.
that way.
Yes. Mm.
And is there a risk of delayed diagnosis or in most cases of FASD picked up easily? I think you touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating here.
No, there's a lot of delayed diagnosis. It's very common, and sadly, if it's mainly sort of the behaviour that people are focusing on, again, the mother is blamed perhaps as not being a good mother, or there's not enough discipline there. The signs can be very subtle, and they can overlap with ADHD, with autism, or trauma, and so the children who are not diagnosed or diagnosed as something else can be just left without the correct support. And of course, those missed opportunities are meaning that early childhood support, which really does make a difference, is just not there. So up to 70% of those living with FASD will also have ADHD. Now we know how common ADHD is. So when you think that 70% of people living with FASD will have that, you can see how easily it's misdiagnosed.
Yes, for
And
sure.
big problems around that.
Yes. But yeah, super important in terms of treatments and
Yes.
other ways to deal with it, I imagine.
Absolutely, yes. The strategies, especially in classroom,
Mm,
quite different. If I was supporting a child with autism, I would use different strategies to support a child with FASD.
mm,
And
yeah,
the children are different. You really do need to understand FASD to see that you need to treat them
yeah.
with different supports. Yep.
And we'll come to that even deeper, but you might want to let us know now, like what kind of complications do kids with FASD face, and how might that be different to, um, some of these other conditions that we're mentioning? Do you
Mm.
want to tell us maybe what it looks like?
Well, it's tricky because it is a whole body disorder. So we're not just thinking about the brain. And research shows us that there's possibly over 400 different traits. So there's
Mm,
physical traits, there's cognitive traits, the behavior, emotional traits, and health traits. Excuse me. So most individuals will have their own combination of these, that's
mm,
unique to them. No two people have the same profile with FASD. It's not just tick the box, therefore they've got FASD situation. And of course, you don't have 400 traits, but you might
mm,
have, some bone problems or hearing or eye problems, or,
mm,
you might have, you may have the facial features. Only a very small percentage present with the facial features, and that depends on the time when the alcohol was consumed during the pregnancy. Some have a lot of memory problems, learning difficulties, impulsivity, and friendship issues, social cues, have struggling with challenges around there.
mhm.
Health traits like sleep, sensory, a lot of sensory problems usually arise, and concurring conditions. So
Huh.
when you're overlapping, and in our situation, we had the trauma as well as the FASD, a lot of those traits were crossing over. So it becomes really difficult to define and say, right, this is caused by the FASD. There are some
Yeah.
common traits, of course, the core traits, um, the things like dysmaturity, memory, those sorts of things are often the ones that we really focus on,
Mm.
that are more common in most children. So then
Ah,
you have the
yes.
learning difficulties that develop because of all of these things, the memory
Mm.
gaps, difficulty understanding consequences. Consequences don't work for kids with FASD. They live in the moment, a lot of
Right.
social challenges and social
Uh-huh.
problems.
Mm.
They end up with a higher risk of school suspension, mental health struggles,
Mm.
and involvement in the justice system down the track. So it all sort of unfolds because things weren't addressed early in the piece.
Yeah, it shows, well, early intervention, yes, but also intervention by understanding the root cause is what you've repeated
Yes.
several
Yes,
times.
Megan, you're so right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And,
to get
and
that right.
understanding that this is not, no mother knowingly would harm their child. So we've got to be so aware of this no blame, no shame
Mm. I love
attitude,
that.
where
Yeah.
we really are there supporting this family and this child, and particularly the mother, who often is just riddled with guilt through no fault of her own. You know,
Yeah.
50% of pregnancies in Australia are unexpected. 50%.
Wow.
So
Half.
you could be having a big celebration, a wedding, been out on a cruise, and be drinking fairly heavily, and then find out you're 6 weeks pregnant. You know, a fair
This
bit
is
of
so
harm's
true.
already. Yep.
This is so true. And
So
yeah,
yes,
right at that really that critical
yep.
inception stage.
It's
Well, yeah,
around 60% of women consume alcohol before they know they're pregnant. And so often we hear, oh, I gave up. As soon as I found out I was pregnant, I gave up. But if you have had, and again, not necessarily dependent on alcohol, but just socially drinking, you could have had a fair bit during those first few weeks where you were unaware. And they're
sure.
very crucial developmental stages.
Yeah, it's kind of frightening
Very
how
frightening.
easy, because a lot, well, most chronic medical conditions um are there's no choice, right? It could
Yes.
be genetic
Yes.
or who knows why. But this is something where awareness could actually make a profound difference, or
Oh,
actually
absolutely. Totally.
prevent it
Yes.
completely from
Yes.
happening. And
Yes.
yet, when we think about it and just those really critical details for us to understand, 50% of pregnancies are unexpected. And 40%, did you say 40% of women have been drinking before they discover that they've
No, it's high. It's higher than that. It's nearly
oh,
around 60%.
ah,
Yeah, of women, they consume alcohol before knowing that they were pregnant. So that, I mean, that's very high.
yeah,
And
yeah.
as you said, that's why our warnings are, if you think you could become pregnant, do not drink alcohol.
Well,
You know,
that
it's
could
not
be
a
just
matter of
anyone,
even,
couldn't
pardon?
it? That could be anybody.
Well, it could be, but that's how vital it is. I mean, it's
Yeah,
life-changing. And
absolutely
we
life-changing,
really
and
want that
life-changing for
message.
the family too, in
Oh,
terms of
yes.
the the I don't want to use the word management, but let's just use it, the management of that situation
Mm,
um,
mm.
for the family and the child then is a really significant undertaking, I imagine.
Absolutely, yes. And we even say this in supporting the mothers not to drink. This is not
Mm,
just her. This is a whole society. This is the partners and the fathers. They need to be there to support the mother
yeah.
and help her get through these 9 months without drinking. Because, I mean, it's one thing to be a social drinker, but if you are dependent on alcohol, it is another whole
Mm,
journey and not an easy one.
mm,
So
yeah. Well,
we
I
need.
don't drink anymore, but there was a time when I'd have a glass of wine or two just about every night with
Mm.
dinner. So, and I didn't consider myself to
No,
have a problem with alcohol. I think it was when I had to write it on a form in a doctor's surgery, and I went, 2 times 7. So, do you know what I mean? I did the
yes, yes,
maths,
yes, yes.
and that isn't even necessarily why I stopped drinking, but I just it could have been me. I guess that's what I'm saying.
It could have been any of us,
Yeah,
Megan.
yeah,
It's not, it's anybody in Australia. It is
mm,
not just one of these things that says settle down. And that's where so often people assumed it was just an Indigenous problem. It just, oh, that wouldn't happen. I've asked to speak at schools and they've said, oh, we
indeed.
wouldn't have that problem at our school. You know,
No,
that's
no.
very narrow-minded.
Do you drink? Are you? Is there a possibility
No.
you could be or get
Yes.
pregnant? I mean, I think that's the key point here for me, is that anybody who would be making that judgment, and I can put myself in that category too, because before we were talking, I might have even thought, oh, gee, how could you do that? But when you've taken us to that moment of recognition of the fact that many pregnancies, well, you're saying half are unexpected, and then that you could have been drinking without knowing, that could be just anyone. And
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
think to join the dots on that is so, so important because even as a teacher working obviously in a school, and then you come along and you share about this and they come to understand that some of the children in their class or school have FASD, they might even still say, oh, gee, that's terrible, not thinking
Mm.
of the possibility that if they drink, it could be them. And I
Yes,
think this
so
is a
true.
really
Yes,
key point
yes,
here.
yes. And that judgment that, but even if it's unbiased judgment, I mean, there's a lot of judgment around these mothers. They
Yeah,
don't need that. They're
no.
struggling enough. They need our support because it could
Mm.
have been any one of us. You're so right. Yes.
Yeah, and I wonder, it's in your experience, do you think that where FASD might be, well, is diagnosed, that the mother, the family might still prefer to call it ADHD or autism spectrum disorder
Yes, or
in
just
order
a
to.
neurodevelopmental disorder.
Mm,
Um, I don't think ADHD would really
mm,
serve a child. I think they could just say, yes, some do.
mm,
I'd rather just,
yeah,
there's no need to tell anybody you have the right diagnosis. You can just say it's a neurodevelopmental disorder.
yeah.
Enough.
Do
Um,
GPs diagnose this? Who is picking up?
it's a there's another whole there's another whole webinar for us. Diagnosis is very tricky because it's a multi-team approach.
Uh-huh,
We need psychologists and pediatricians, and we need occupational therapists, speech therapists.
uh-huh.
It's quite complex, and
Mm,
it's based on the domains, 9 domains of the brain, and assessing each of the domains. And then look, it's quite complex. So I won't go into it now, but
okay, yeah,
it's
but we should
not
know
an
that.
easy thing to diagnose, which is another problem of why
Yes.
so few people are diagnosed.
I think it's way underreported, Christine. That would be my guess.
Underreported, yes. And the waiting list is years long. It's
Mm.
really hard to get in unless you.
Underreported and not undiagnosed. I think there'd be the numbers are much higher than
Yeah.
what we're acknowledging here. Given what you've said, I really think that would be the case.
Mm.
Um, well, I could just keep talking about
Very
the
interesting.
detail of this. Let's move on to the next question, which is how are siblings of kids with FASD impacted and what should families be across?
Well, look, with any type of illness, disorder, condition, it's hard on the siblings because they're not going to have the same amount of attention as perhaps the person that's
Mm,
struggling. If it's in a family and there's only one child with FASD, then perhaps the siblings are very protective and more, a little understanding, although they become frustrated and a bit overshadowed with the behaviour. But sadly, sometimes there are a number of siblings in one family, and we often see this, particularly if there has been a problem with alcohol. So you might have, a number of children, and this becomes really difficult, really hard to handle. So
mm,
peers often
mm,
don't understand. They can't, this is so hidden. You look at the child, if you saw my gorgeous girl, you would think, wow, she's great at sport, she's funny, she's got a job now, there's nothing wrong with her. They don't understand. They see this person that looks to them perfectly fine, and they're not, and they don't get it. And so they
yeah,
perhaps start bullying them or annoying them or just being difficult.
mm,
So you have that interplay between siblings, which is not always positive.
mm,
And again, with education and the family understanding that if this child was supported in the right way, the behaviour wouldn't perhaps be so severe.
yeah.
A tricky area to cope with, and each case, of course, is separate and different. So,
Mm. Well, this leads us to school. So, what's the current population of school-aged children? You mentioned this earlier,
yeah,
with FASD, and how accurate is this?
not accurate, I'd have to say. We don't have exact numbers because FASD is
Mm,
underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And we went over that before, it's often ADHD or trauma or um, even anxiety,
yeah.
autism, a lot of these cross over. So it's hard to know. We're saying there's probably one in every classroom. Of course, some classrooms would have more, some would have less. It's about having the teachers really become aware enough to be able to say, I think this child might have FASD. But of course, a
Mm,
sensitive thing because you cannot approach a parent with that. That's not the place of the teacher. But just understanding that for diagnosis, we need evidence of prenatal alcohol exposure. And that's
mm,
not always easy to get. And, some parents don't want to talk about it.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's tricky to have it diagnosed. My advice to teachers, if you suspect it, then start putting the strategies in place. Diagnosis or no diagnosis. The strategies
Yeah.
are often very successful for all children, and they're
Uh-huh.
things that will support those
Mm.
with FASD. And just having that, that idea that maybe it is, therefore I can help this child the best way I can through using these strategies.
Yes, and we'll be able to draw on your incredible knowledge there at the intersection of being a carer, and now a subject matter expert, I might add, on this, but also as a teacher. Before we do that, could you let us know if kids with FASD currently miss a lot of school, and if so, why?
Well, yes, they do. Perhaps more as they get a little bit older into the teenage years.
Mm,
They have, suspensions, exclusions, school refusal, and so much of it is around their inability to regulate their behaviour.
mm,
And so they're suspended from school. My daughter went to a wonderful school. It was actually a boarding school because she comes from a long way away, and they would ring us. It was a funny situation because we actually didn't live that far away. And they would say she's not coping. And they were wonderful because they'd never say, she's naughty or anything. They'd just say she needs a break. Can you come straight away? So we'd zoom out there and grab her and bring her home for a few days. And
mm,
just she'd de-escalate and we'd, look after her and pamper her and calm her down. And then she was ready to go back. But her anxiety levels had just got higher and higher and higher. She couldn't cope and she'd lash out and all sorts of problems were happening at school. So that was a great way of supporting her. And she got through and finished year 12 because the school were aware of the best way to handle her. And she wasn't told she was naughty. She was just she need a little bit of a break. And I
mm.
think if schools are open to that sort of thing, that's wonderful because it gets them from an environment that is highly anxious to be in all day long. They're often getting into trouble. When you can't even pack your own bag or get to a place on time, you've got no sense of time, organisation skills are very poor. You're always going to be in trouble. You're going to be the child.
Always on the back foot.
I know, and it's simple
Mm,
things can solve these problems, but
yeah.
teachers are, overworked and don't even think of them, and
Mm,
consequently, school becomes a horrible place to be in every day. So, yes, a lot of
yeah.
children don't want to go to school. They play up to get out of school, or that they can't help their behaviour. They really can't.
Or they're invited not to be in the classroom. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm.
Yes. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, the other thing I want to draw attention to is the difference that it makes when a school does have the knowledge and insight that you've brought to the
mhm.
table. And so together you can work that out, and just what early intervention and ongoing good interventions can achieve a year
Yes.
12 outcome for a student, a young person who
Yes.
probably wouldn't have got there without that.
I can tell you she wouldn't have. The school
Yeah.
were great. We were there for her. This is a child that had been taken from her home at an early age, suffered severe trauma. She's now completed year 12. She's got a job. She's driving a car. Now, she needs me every single day to
Yeah.
help her organise her life. Every single day. She's actually not living with us at the moment, but we'll talk on the phone 2 or 3 times a day. And it'll be the funniest little questions that she cannot manage. So I'm there for her as a backup person. But she's achieved so much. We're so proud of her because of all that was put into place at a very early age.
Absolutely. And the life-changing effects of an education
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
someone
And the
believing in you.
self-pride and that feeling
Just
that, look,
everything.
yeah,
It's everything.
it
And
is.
and you know, for anyone who's listening, we could predict where that would have headed, with all of those
Mhm,
circumstances running against her.
mm,
And look what was able to be achieved. I think that's
mm.
really just so inspiring, because if we can do that for one young person, we can do it for all of them. We just
Well,
have
I
to
would like to
find
think
the
so, Megan.
right, we
I
have
don't
to
know all of
find the
them.
right.
Thousands and thousands of kids out there need some help.
They do. I
Yeah,
have to believe it can happen.
that would be
It
lovely. Yeah.
just um
Mm,
yeah, to leave a child, as you say, look, to leave a child, in those circumstances, and as you say, through no fault of their own. But even if it is through a fault of their own, it's still up to us as adults
Yes.
to shepherd them through an education in the hopes that you can break the cycle of those things that might have led to them being or displaying, the results of those circumstances in their behaviours or their inability to cope. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a really wonderful moment to just reflect on early intervention and understanding empathy, which you've talked about so often in our conversation as well, to then hear how that makes a difference.
Mm.
And at the same time, there's still somebody in the background helping that young person to navigate the
Yeah.
world as well, and
Yes.
and what's possible. I think it's really, really wonderful.
Mm.
Um, so, Christine, what are the critical times then in the school life of a kid with FASD? And tell us a little bit about your um, thoughts about those kind of critical times.
Well, I was primarily a early years teacher in the first years of school, so I always, I don't know whether it's because I loved it so much, always say these are vital years. If a child can learn to love school in those first year or two of school, you've given them a gift, because school from then on is a very positive experience for them. Even if they have their bad years, they'll be able to know that it's not always like that. So those early years, adjusting and fitting into structure and learning social rules are vital. And establishing those for a child living with FASD is more difficult, but can be done. And understanding that for them it'll be a lot harder. So those early years are really vital. And the transition into high school, that's huge, because that independence is expected of them, and a lot of them really struggle with that.
Mm.
The academic demands are often overwhelming. Interestingly enough, only 26% of children living with FASD have a intellectual disability. So it's not as, we've got a lot of people that we know with FASD that have got very high IQs.
Mm.
It doesn't
Mm.
always, we can't assume that a child with FASD has got a low IQ, struggling with schoolwork. So it can be tricky for them going into that secondary level. That's a difficult time. The teenage years, the hormonal changes, they're struggling, they're not really fitting into, they have dysmaturity, so they might be 16 or 17, but emotionally they're only 7 or 8.
Mm.
And this, of course, is with them all their
The
life. And
developmental.
developmentally, their understanding of things like time and money is years less than their actual age. So
Mm.
these are the things that I deal with my girl, who's now 20, and in much of her behaviour is that of a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Looks like a 20-year-old, loves the music of a 20-year-old, but still has some very immature behaviour, thoughts, abilities to cope socially, manage herself. So that stage of moving into the teenage years is a difficult time for them.
Yeah.
A lot of peer pressure, and that's often where you see the mental health issues starting to develop.
Uh-huh.
And
And
that's,
what about puberty as a hormonal issue?
yes,
Does that add
difficult.
into the mix there?
It does. It really
Mm.
does. And you'll often see these are the stages where the kids are getting into trouble. I mean, they seem to get into trouble anyhow, but you add FASD into the mix. That these kids want to please, and so if you've got a bit of a leader in the group, and they'll be targeting the children that are weaker and want to please, and they end up in situations where they're just way in over their head and they don't understand, but they'll do what they're told, and they'll go and do things that they shouldn't be doing, and they'll get into trouble.
Probably easier to just do what people say because it's hard to make the decisions for yourself, it sounds
That's
like.
right. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And they
So we'll go with what.
confibulate, so they confibulate, and so they'll make up stories. It becomes very complex and difficult, and often that's a time in their lives where they just pull out of school
Mm.
altogether.
Mm. Yes. Um, okay, so they're the critical times, and I just want to throw this sub question in. At what point, well, I'll ask you two questions. At what point did you share with your girl that you suspected or was it a diagnosis that this was what was going on for her?
Yeah.
And what would you I mean, do children get told that they have FASD?
That's
What
a
is their
really good
experience?
question. That's a great question, Megan, and something that we're often asked on our helpline. And it's also a very personal question because
Mm,
families have their own views on this. They really do. So I'm sharing with you my view, which I have to say is truly only my view. I can't say it's necessarily the recommended view. It's worked for us because of our situation. So she was living with us when she was 7. And when I started suspecting that it was FASD and she was doing some things that, really challenging, I would say to her, I think that maybe your brain's not working like other people's brains because you're finding it really hard to do this or that, or, you can't remember to go and brush your teeth and you can't remember this and that. So little things would come up and I would start talking that maybe your brain's working a bit differently. And then I said to her, your mummy didn't know that it wasn't a good idea to drink alcohol when she was having you. It wasn't her fault. She didn't know. And that's why your brain works differently. So we kept that going for a long time.
mm.
And she really understood it. And she would tell people, oh, my mum drank alcohol. And it was just, so blasé. And we introduced the whole idea of it's got a name. It's called fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And lots of
Yes.
kids have got it.
Yeah.
And these are the things. And then as she grew older, and now that she's not living with us, I wrote out a list for her of how her FASD presents. She gets tired very easily, which is another common trait. She
Hmm.
needs to sleep virtually every afternoon. I mean, every afternoon through school, she was asleep on the. Well, I always say thank you to the teacher that put the couch in the classroom so she could have a lie down.
I
Others
love it.
told me she was lazy. She was always had the head on the desk to sleep in the afternoon, and to this day she goes
Fatigue.
that. Sorry.
Fatigue.
Fatigue, absolute,
Mm,
absolute. I'm trying so hard to keep going.
mm,
And a lot of sleeping problems, hard to
yeah.
get to sleep, hard to wake up. A lot
Yeah.
of these children suffer
Yeah.
sleeping problems. So I wrote out all the things that I thought that her FASD, was
Mm,
caused by her FASD. And that sort of helped her a lot. And she's so good about it. And I said to her recently, have you told your boss, she works at a shop, that you've got FASD? And she said, oh, yeah, I told her I have. And she went home at lunchtime one day and didn't come back. The boss rang. She said, oh, sorry, I fell asleep. And the boss was great and said, okay, well, now you're awake. Will you come back to work? And I thought, that's because she knows she's got FASD and
yeah.
she's making allowances. So that's the sort
Yeah.
of world I want these kids to live in, where people get it and they don't say, oh, how could you do that? You're meant to be at work and all the rest of it. You've lost it.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, we're so into the cookie cutter model, aren't we? We
Oh,
really
you know
are.
what? It's
Ugh,
not hard to make allowances
I
like
know, but we're
this.
even just like, again, I count myself in it. It's just, I have to constantly, we're indoctrinated into this
Yeah.
is how people should be. And,
No.
you have to constantly be vigilant about your own processing of the world of others.
Mm.
Um, because, yeah, I just keep saying different brains, different bodies, different behaviors. It's,
Absolutely, yes. But
yeah.
for some reason, we don't find. I know somebody said to me once, well, of course, the justice system, jails are full of people with FASD, and they said, gosh, if they all had Down syndrome, there'd be a national outcry. And I thought,
Absolutely.
so true.
Yeah, it is.
But
It's,
we can't see FASD, so
yeah,
we expect
invisible
so much more.
condition.
Mm, we expect.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement, actually.
It's really hit me, and I'll often say it's like saying to a child, "Grow taller." I've told you 3 times, grow taller. Why aren't you growing
Yeah,
taller?
yeah,
Can't. That's the end.
yeah. And especially let's overlay with that in many states in Australia, you know, the age of criminality is 10 or incarceration to be 10 years old. We're just really, why? I mean, yeah, this just really joins some dots for me, as I said. Um, so what should families and schools be prepared for at different times? Then we've talked about the critical times. So if you want to just reinforce a few of the key messages there.
I suppose in those early years, just provide routine that which all little ones love. Lots of visual supports. Don't expect them to remember things. And I often use that example where before I realised that it was FASD we were dealing with, I'd be saying, go and brush your teeth. Well, she could never get from the kitchen to the bathroom. She'd be under the bed. She'd be out in the carport, on the roof of the house. It was never where she should have been. And then instead of me getting annoyed, which I used to regularly about this toothbrush business, I just thought, right, I've got to change this. And it was no use asking her. I had to change. So I just took her by the hand. We walked up to the bathroom together and brushed our teeth together. Problem solved. Easy.
Yeah.
We both enjoyed it. Easy to do. So it doesn't have to be hard to support these children. Just think differently, and make sure that you've got a lot of patience, a
Mm.
huge amount of patience. Just
Yeah.
control your inner urges to get annoyed and frustrated and understand they're not doing this on purpose. They are not
No.
doing it on purpose. They're
I'm glad you
beautiful
shared that,
children. They're
Christine.
funny and they're lots of fun. They need lots of patience.
Yeah.
So I think parents should work closely with the teachers and really help them understand the strategies for learning that's
Yeah.
going to work for them.
Yeah.
And then as they get older, focus on strengths, always build on their strengths, find out what they are and make sure that the learning is based around that.
Mm.
Looking at their life skills, building up their life skills. That was my big thing. I wanted her to be independent. I'm getting older. What's going to happen? We need her to be able to, cook for herself and look after herself and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So those are a few of the little things that I would suggest.
Yeah.
Mm.
Christine, everyone listening is thinking, I wish I had a teacher like Christine. um,
Oh,
but
that's very kind. Thanks, me.
yeah, no, it's a beautiful moment to just hear I was the one who had to change, and it was just so simple.
Yeah,
Instead of
very simple.
asking and being
Yeah,
perpetually disappointed and then resentful or frustrated,
yeah.
we'll just do it together, and that solves the whole
Yeah.
problem.
Look, I learned that long before I had a
Mm,
child living with FASD in my house. I
yeah,
learned in the
yeah,
classroom if I wanted to have a happy day, don't
I
rely
love
on the
that.
children. I had to rely on myself to be happy.
Yeah, there's something very like Zen about it, actually. It's like, going with the flow
Yeah,
rather than trying to move the water or fight
yes,
against it. It's like, well, yeah, all of those options are there, but we're often taking the one that's just not working. And um, yeah, I really just understanding what could be different in the classroom, and those approaches could actually help everyone, not just the student with
yes,
FASD or the
yes.
students with FASD or any other condition for that matter.
Mm. Oh, there's many a reason a child will be misbehaving in the classroom, and telling them to stop it is not going to be the way to do it.
No, well, they're kind of designed to do it. That's what I think. I've been talking a lot about, I think the current school model no longer fits
Ah,
the demographic of students and the world that they live in.
mm,
I can really see that disconnect very clearly now.
I
And
agree.
I've been
Oh,
working on this for a long time, and I can tell you I thought it was just that the school model needed to add two-way digital connection to the classroom for kids who couldn't be there. And that was very simple. Then it was proved in COVID. And it was just
yeah,
like, why did we bring forward all of the problems of COVID-19 and left all of the innovation behind? I mean, but it's more than that. It's that we have a whole, and we talk about this, but we have a whole new generation of young people,
mm,
Gen Z, um, Gen Alpha. They are designed differently.
mm.
They are in a different world, and we're trying to kind of fit them
Yeah,
into an
mm,
analog kind of old-fashioned school model that required you to sit and do what you were told, and we did it.
and it's not working.
It's not working. And it's just being disrupted now by 21st century pressures, and it will have to change.
Yeah, yeah,
I can see that happening day after day. But unfortunately it looks very fractured out there. A lot of different sort of pop-up models, some of them quite worrying, that I don't think will be safe for children, online scaled technological school set up for commercial reasons. Yeah, I see your face too.
no,
It's really,
no,
really troubling, and
not,
not only academically unsafe, but also just not safe.
not safe. And really, but I can hear your worry, and
Mm,
I share it with you.
mm,
I've always said that all behaviour is functional, and we've got to look at the child and
yeah,
say, why are they behaving this way? Let's not say you have to behave a certain way that I want you to behave. Let's get to the bottom of that behaviour and see. Maybe
Yeah,
they can't get with
functional.
the cold. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe there's 100 reasons why their
Ah,
behavior is
yes.
like it is. But let's sort out the problem before we just expect it to change the behavior.
Yeah, and you know, kids typically are very happy just to have a good time, aren't they? If it's enjoyable,
Yes,
they'll get in there. Like, they're the
I
first
know.
ones
And
in.
why can't learning be fun?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, don't get me started.
We'll head off on a tangent, I'm sure, but I think it is important to recognize this too. And I wonder um if there is societally an increase in alcohol consumption that is also potentially increasing this. I don't know the facts or figures on that. You may wish to comment on that if you do have that data that yes, people, women, men, everyone is drinking more and more often. And so maybe this is also going to be, um, you know, well, part of the reason why we'd see more children in schools facing this issue.
No, I don't have data on that. I don't even really want to comment without sort of knowing more. But
Yeah.
um, of course, we're looking at the children now that are at school, the teenagers that are struggling, that were born 16 years ago.
Mm,
Now, I would like to think we've come a lot further with our knowledge of FASD. I
yes.
still meet people who say, "What is it? I've never heard of it." Or I've heard of it a bit like myself years ago and didn't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So all we can do is put this out. And people like you are
Mm,
helping us spread the word and tell
yes.
people, these young women and the young men, that they need to make sure that during pregnancy, before you even get
Mm,
pregnant, you stop drinking.
yeah. It's consequential for everyone.
Of
And
course.
and so if we think about those big challenges and vulnerabilities facing kids with FASD at school, would you like to share more on what you think could be different? What's happening now to address the challenges, and is it enough? Or what should governments know? What should schools know? What should we be doing to remedy this?
Yeah. Well, I think we're stuck in that sort of children are being misunderstood, they're being
Mm,
punished and excluded. This is not the way to solve the problem. You know, that they're considering that they're the problem. Well, they're not the problem. The system's the problem. They have difficulty with memory and following instructions and regulating their emotions and huge issues around their executive functioning skills,
I
which
was going to
is
say
every
that.
part of every day. And
Yes.
of course, this maturity, if you're in a class of 16-year-olds and your mind is working like an 8-year-old, that is hard. That is
Mhm.
really difficult. So there has the social isolation and the bullying starts developing. They get very tired, as I mentioned before. Often this is a problem with the kids with FASD and a lot of sleeping issues. So all of these things are huge challenges. They're challenges for the person living with FASD, but they're also challenges for all those interacting with that person throughout the
Mm,
day. So
mm.
they're massive, they're big, and they're not impossible to sort out if they're addressed properly. Yeah, it can be helped. Mm.
Yeah. Well, we're so grateful for your work and obviously the National Organisation for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder in Australia. So before we do a shout out, which we absolutely will to your organisation, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to say anything further that you wanted to say about school quality of life. If if you feel like you've said everything you wanted, we can move on to
Oh,
our final call to action.
I think I could talk all day about it simply because I've been a teacher for so long, and also because I've had so much to do with kids, living with FASD, and I see what they have to go through. I want schools to become aware and really just build up that knowledge so that they can support these kids. The teachers need to really understand them and meet the child where they're at. Don't expect them to come to a level. You go to where they're at and work from there, working on their strengths. As I said before, these kids have got a great sense of humour. They're so much fun. We laugh and laugh in
Yeah.
our house, our girls. I'm not saying we don't throw furniture around and have our moments, but really, It's just a lot of fun because they've got a great sense of humour, and she particularly has got a wonderful sense of humour. So, you need to make allowances. You need to understand that it's not spoiling them, it's just helping them get through their day. So, looking out for them, making sure that you see the triggers that are going to set them off. I mean, it took us a while to work out that going over to the shopping centre and especially going into JB Hi-Fi, we're sure to have a meltdown following that because of the visual overload. If
Yes.
you know these triggers, you can avoid them, and that's really helping them and keeping them calm.
Mm,
Um, Not expecting them to change, but looking at how you can change.
mm.
Really, that's so important. So there's a few things. I mean, there's a lot that we can do, but as a parent, as a carer, as a teacher, I think it's really important that we start looking at the child through the eyes, of them with FSD. So.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point to land on. And obviously underneath all of that, you have a great love for children. That's really obvious, and a great belief in what the way that children can develop and how much of a difference we can make to that pathway. I've really taken that away, and it's incredibly inspirational to me as well in the work that I do to meet you and have listened to you and your attitude towards it all, and not just FASD, but also, you know, I can just picture you as that teacher in the classroom and your kids just having a great experience of learning, which is gold. So as we close, I want to give you the opportunity to give your call to action for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder in 7 words or less. What would you say as call
Um,
to action?
I suppose support FASD awareness. Today's International FASD Day, so we all need to make sure that we support it and spread the word, and help with the understanding and prevention. That's our
Mm,
big aim, I think.
yes, wonderful. And so a big shout out to Christine, also a shout out to National Organisation for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, FASD Australia. And you can find them at www.nofasd.org.au. Thank you for joining me today, Christine. It's been a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you, Megan. Am I allowed to say one more thing?
Yes,
On our
please do.
website, we offer support groups and training webinars and a helpline that runs every day of the year. So please, if you've got any information, any questions, give us a call.
Mm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
amazing. And, give generously over there as well, because this organization is doing such great work, and we've heard firsthand how important that work is and what a difference it can make to a child's life and a family's life. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Help us turn up the volume so all kids are seen and heard. Follow along, like, share, comment, or leave us a review, because we love hearing from you. And if you want to donate, head to missingschool.org.au, because every dollar makes a difference.